Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. I know that some people are still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get going. I just wanted to welcome all of you to our second installment of the Fall 2021 JAMI Career Webinar Series. So this is a collaboration between GSEP Career Services and our Alumni Relations team. So for those of you who have not attended our JAMI Communities of Practice programs in the past, welcome. And if you're wondering what is JAMI, JAMI is a Swahili term for community. And these JAMI Communities of Practice programs are designed to provide up-to-date career insights across our education and psychology industries, as well as promote professional community building through alumni and industry connections. So we're excited to have you all here today for our October session, Careers with a Cause, Social Impact Pathways. So just a reminder that the session is being recorded, so you'll have access to this again at a later date in our participant drive, which we'll share towards the end of the session. The session also does provide live transcription, so you'll can make note of that. And if you have questions that come up during the panel discussion, please feel free to include them in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A. After the formal Q&A, we'll open it up for our chat questions as well. So our outcomes for today, we hope that you will learn about diverse social change career pathways, as well as how you can create positive social change through your current career situation, whatever that might be. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Renee Dorn, our Director of Alumni Relations and an alum from our Organizational Leadership Doctoral Program, who will facilitate our live Q&A. So Dr. Dorn, please feel free to take it from here.
Thank you so much, Yaz, and welcome everyone to our second installment of the JAMI Career Webinar Fall 2021 series, which today's topic is Careers with a Cause, Social Impact Pathways. I'm so excited to talk to the panelists that we have for you today. Our first one is Elizabeth Grizel Voorhees. She was the Entertainment Media Director and current Chief Strategy Officer at Define American. We have Dr. Nee Quarterley-Quarte. He is the COVID-19 vaccine education campaign and multicultural engagement lead, as well as senior advisor and national LGBTQ liaison with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at AARP. And we also have Casey Scherler, Director of Marketing and Communications at Kibbo Group International, Inc., co-founder at ReFarm and owner of Resupply. So welcome to all of our panelists for today. Thank you for being with us. Okay,
thank you, Dr. Dorn.
Thank you. Now, all three of you are graduates from our SEC Social Entrepreneurship Program. So first of all, tell me, why did you select the SEC program at GSEP? Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. So I have an interesting career path. I am a former television producer. I worked in the non-scripted space for about 15 years, executive producing and show running projects for MTV, VH1, Lifetime Television, and OWN. And I had a strong desire to transition into nonprofit work or just something that was a little bit more fulfilling. And what I sort of came to realize is that I was struggling to make that connection between, my prior job and life and the nonprofit space or, social justice space. And going back to grad school at GSEP really, really helped make that connection. And I had the position that I currently hold. I've been in for 5 years. I actually took my job in August after graduating in May. So it definitely was the catalyst for that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Quarte. I'm going to come to you next. So why our GSEP SEC program? What interested you about the program?
Well, thank you again, Dr. Dorn, and it is a pleasure to be back at home with my fellow Pepperdine Waves. You know, Pepperdine was the only graduate school I applied to. I was really on the fence about going to grad school, and I was one of those folks, like so many of us, that worked full time while I was a student full time, and so it really had to be a program that met me where I was at
Right.
in that regard. And Pepperdine did that. It was a new program, and so the opportunity to be a part of a pioneering program at Pepperdine,
Yes.
being able to bring my whole self into the classroom was something that was important to me. Also, as a person of faith and somebody that grew up going to Catholic school, and so for those reasons and so many more, it just made sense. And social impact work has
Yes.
summoned me throughout my life. 7 years old, Mandela during his world tour made a stop at the Oakland Coliseum. My parents took me to see him deliver that speech that left a lasting imprint on me in terms of who I am and the kind of leader I wanted to be. And that led to other experiences that I've had, and so I've been on this trajectory. And Pepperdine's SEC program, in addition to the organizational leadership program, really helped me to professionalize my skill set as a leader and understand the fullness of who I am as an agent of change.
Wonderful. Wow, thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Casey, why GSEP's SEC program? What attracted you to the program?
Well, so many things. First of all, Elizabeth and I were in the same cohort 7. We graduated in 2016 from the social entrepreneurship program, but my background had been in the nonprofit sector, and I love nonprofits. At the time, though, I was living in the Bay Area, and it was really difficult to find a nonprofit position that allowed me to afford rent. And it just started kind of racking my brain with, how can businesses, for-profit businesses, create social impact, and do the two have to be separated? And I had gone to Pepperdine for undergrad, and so I knew that Pepperdine is such a special community that cultivates change makers,
Right.
in all forms. And so when I learned more about the SEC program, I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. These are my people. I love that the cohorts are small. The professors are all so amazing. It's just so hands-on, so relational. And obviously the challenge of creating and pitching your own business plan, it's pretty daunting, but also one of the most life-changing things I'm sure we've all ever done. But just, it was so cool to be able to get many of the tools that you'd get from pursuing a business degree or an MBA, along with so much emphasis on social impact. So wouldn't trade the experience for the world. One of the best decisions I ever made.
Now that's great to hear. That's wonderful. So thank you. Thank you so much. So each one of you have such varied backgrounds. So why did you feel that social entrepreneurship was something that you wanted to do? Elizabeth, you were in entertainment. So how difficult are you finding, or have you found, bringing in social change into that entertainment space?
Yeah, so I am really grateful that I actually, in my current role, sit at the intersection of social justice and entertainment, popular culture. I work for an immigrant-focused organization, and I'm the liaison for the organization with the entertainment industry. And we push for less stereotypical representation of immigrants, more humanized portrayal of immigrants across sort of all mediums, from entertainment media to journalism, across the board to digital spaces. So I think that the job that I'm in now, the role that I found is really was a needle in a haystack for me to sit exactly where I wanted to, and to bring in everything that I learned from SEC to, my previous experience as a television producer is extremely, extremely rare in some ways, but also I think that in all sectors, these kinds of intersections are more widely available and opening up now. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that, with my background as a television producer, again, like I'll say, that what the company saw in me was also the fact that I was recently graduating, having spent basically 2 years talking about social justice issues, and that I would know how to speak the language. I would know, be acutely aware of how to bring that into the work. So I had sort of the both and I think that made me a desirable and viable candidate for my role. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let me ask you, how, looking at social media today and everything that we see, whether we're looking at on television or on the internet, how difficult is it with your position to try and change the minds of people regarding immigrants, or trying to put messaging out there to say, as far as when your company is concerned, we're all American, when you're talking about define American?
It's definitely an uphill battle. 34% of immigrant characters on television right now are actually criminalized. And that is wildly a departure from numbers in reality. So there's a lot of work to be done. One of our core programs right now is actually fighting misinformation and disinformation in digital spaces, particularly on YouTube. And so what we've seen on YouTube is, with the algorithm and the extremist content, there's currently just a huge rise in anti-immigrant sentiment, white supremacist thinking. And so we're launching content strategies to try to combat the ladder of engagement towards that sort of more radicalized anti-immigrant viewpoint. So the work is very exciting. It's changing all the time as media is constantly changing. And it's difficult. It's definitely a David and Goliath situation. The organization I work for, we have 20 employees. I was employee number 7 when I was hired. So we're tiny, but I think that we are wielding a very large power in media, and being able to have those conversations and work with influencers, content creators who actually reach millions and millions and millions of viewers. 80% of the content that's consumed globally is produced in the United States. Right here, I live in Los Angeles, right in California. So there's just enormous opportunity to have a global impact that's positive and healthy.
Well, that's wonderful. We need you. It's definitely seeing that we do need you. So I'm Dr. Corte. Now, Elizabeth was talking about the misinformation that is getting out to people, and you're working with senior populations with AARP. So how are you putting out the messaging, trying to talk to them about COVID-19 vaccine education and that campaign, or even LGBTQ issues? So how are you doing that in your role?
Yeah, we have our work cut out for us, to say the least, but we are up for the challenge, and this work is definitely not for the faint of heart. I have the good fortune of being able to suit up every day on behalf of AARP's 38 million members across the country, of which a significant portion of those members represent multicultural communities, represent the LGBTQ community. And so, I have had the good fortune of being able to advance our social impact agenda, to develop a canon of research that really helps us to understand what it is that we're trying to solve. And, I think that's a really important piece that I'd like to tease out for folks, that, it's important for us to do our homework. I think the SEC program offers you an introduction to sort of, the research skill set that you're going to need in order to understand the challenges that we're trying to solve. Certainly the organizational leadership program, and now the global leadership program offer you an opportunity to go even deeper in that regard. Having those skills really made a big difference in terms of my ability to uncover and articulate our blueprint for social impact, a blueprint that has been socialized and that has been accepted, and that we're currently executing against across the country. Now, when I started, there were 26 AARP state offices across the country prioritizing LGBTQ work in their state plans.
Right.
Not because they didn't have interest, but they didn't know what to do. What was AARP's lane in that area of work? And now as we sit here today, 42 state offices are prioritizing LGBTQ work in their state plans, making a tangible difference on the ground. And so when I think about social entrepreneurship,
Right.
I think of us as social change engineers. Social change engineers. I think of us as change makers in the public interest.
Okay.
I'm excited that, I get to do that kind of work at one of the largest social enterprises in the world, which is AARP.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just have to say, I'm also a member of AARP, and I
Yeah.
see some of the messaging that comes through in my email. So I thank you for sending those out.
It's our pleasure.
Now, Casey, when it comes, we hear a lot about climate change and the environment, but that seems like one of your passions when it comes to environmental sustainability. So with your business, Resupply, how are you combining working with the community, working with the environment, and being an entrepreneur? How are you putting all of that together?
Yeah. And just for some background for everyone, I recently opened a zero waste store called Resupply. I now live on a farm in Oklahoma. I moved back from the Bay Area shortly before the pandemic started. And when I moved back here with my husband, we were identifying a lot of problems. And part of the reason we wanted to move back here was because we live in a very polarized climate. I lived in a place where, social justice and social change were prioritized parts of life. And our community here, it hasn't so much been like that. So our goal has really just been to hit the ground running. What problems can we tangibly do something about? And so Resupply was one of those. We live near a city that doesn't even have recycling. I doubt Oklahoma and Texas will ever ban plastic bags. I hope that they will, but so, how can we create a space for the community to be invited into a conversation about making change? And most of my previous work and passions were more large scale in focus, and the work that I'm doing now is extremely localized. And so it's been a huge shift for me, but now I see my role as making waves through a local context, through empowering other people with knowledge, education, information, and just ways to minimize their carbon footprint. So it's definitely a juggling act for sure, and I'm still learning along the way. But again, being able to balance running a business, but having social impact at the helm of that business, it just really feels, I feel grateful and honored to be able to work with my passion, which as social entrepreneurs, we can do in so many sectors, so many industries. And that's really one of the coolest parts about it.
That's wonderful. Could you tell everyone what you have as part of your business? Because you also have a website, and I've gone on your website and seen the different aspects of it, but could you just tell everyone some of the things that you do with Resupply?
Sure. So we encourage people to bring their own containers into the store and refill with a variety of products, a wide range of household goods, herbs, spices, shampoos, detergents. Everything is plastic free. So we also all have cupboards full of old mason jars and pickle jars that we can really put to good use. So that's one sort of arm of it. And then my husband and I run a regenerative farm. So the focus of our food production is regenerating soil health. So it's actually a concept that goes beyond sustainability, because sustainability is great, but our climate is sort of at this pinnacle moment where we don't have time to simply sustain. How do we regenerate soil? And in turn, how do we, regenerate our health when we have seen a rise in the last several decades of non-communicable diseases because our food system is, becoming more, I don't want to say poisoned, but it's sort of just a byproduct of the way our food is created, and it travels long distances. So how do we create this sort of local economy, which also has been really highlighted by the pandemic? We've seen so many supply chain issues and supply chain shortages. So how do we create spaces where people can buy their food locally, buy their products locally, minimize waste, minimize travel time. That's sort of our goal in all of this. But you can check out our website. I can post it in the chat too. It's resupplytx.com. But yeah, that's kind of the spiel.
All right, thank you. One thing that you had mentioned is the supply chain issues because of everything going on with COVID. And Dr. Corte had mentioned the messaging that he has been putting out there regarding COVID-19 and the vaccines and everything. So how has really the pandemic affected your business?
Yeah, well, I just opened the store this year, so in the middle of the pandemic.
In the
but
middle.
I would say that the pandemic, the farm we've been running for 3 years, but with the store part of it, I think the pandemic was sort of the catalyst because we were seeing these shortages, because more and more people are relying on, you know, Walmart and Amazon to get things to their doorstep, which is fine. But it's not necessarily the most sustainable way, and it does produce a lot of waste. And so again, because our city doesn't have recycling, because we don't have solutions to the many problems that plague us, how can we just be one small part of that solution and get people the products that they need, and also get them products that are good for their home, safe for their homes. So we kind of have the health component along with the environmental component that we're trying to balance there.
Oh, wow. It is a balance. It sounds like it is a balance. That's for sure. Dr. Corte, what about you with the work that you're doing with AARP and the LGBTQ community? How has the pandemic affected the work that you have been doing as far as social impact and change?
Yeah, the pandemic has impacted our work tremendously. It has led to an increase in investment in our digital infrastructure. And so, you know, AARP has state offices in all 50 states and territories. And then we also have a big national office here in Washington, DC. We haven't had anybody in the offices for the past 18 months or so, right? And so that's forced us to really pivot and think differently about how do we show up in community, how do we engage, our members and the larger community. And so I think that has fundamentally made us a better organization, a more nimble organization, hopefully more relevant, particularly in these times. It's also had us focus on a very vigorous advocacy agenda. And so we've been out front, advocating for our nation's older adults and seniors when it comes to, COVID-19 vaccine and prioritizing older adults and the distribution of the vaccine and the booster shots. Right now we have our teams working with folks on Capitol Hill to make sure that when it comes to this infrastructure bill, that America's older adults and seniors are not an afterthought when it comes to investments in Medicare, increased investment in Medicare, particularly when it comes to hearing aids and eyes and all of that. And so that work is afoot on the Hill. And, I'd also add, caregiving has been a signature issue for AARP for a long time. I know there are family caregivers that are on with us right now. Some of our colleagues and classmates are balancing work and school and responsibilities around caregiving. And so, we've been, pushing for a caregiving tax credit among, other means by which we know family caregivers will feel some relief. Paid family leave is one of the issues that we are currently pushing for on the Hill. There's a proposal for 12 weeks of paid family leave. There's another proposal for 4 weeks. We want to get some time, whether it's anywhere between 4 to 12, we want to make sure that we deliver. And so, that all of these things probably wouldn't happen as simultaneously, as vigorously if we weren't in this pandemic. And so, this is how AARP has responded, how we've hopefully hopefully heard the call and answered the call to serve our members.
Have you seen an uptick in the senior population, maybe logging into the website or attending the virtual seminars and workshops such as that?
Absolutely. I think I heard a figure from our communications colleagues that between the beginning of within the first 6 months of the pandemic, I think web traffic to aarp.org was somewhere around 22 million unique visitors. Folks going to AARP as a trusted source of information. One of our colleagues, just talked about, Elizabeth had just talked about some of the challenges around misinformation.
Right.
We take very seriously that folks come to us as a source of trusted, vetted information. And we have maintained that. We have prioritized that during the pandemic, and we'll continue to do so.
Excellent. I hope you do. I hope you do. Thank you. So, Elizabeth, when it comes to the messaging that you are putting out through Define American, what would you like us to know, and how can we participate or even help with messaging regarding certain issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So much of what happens in media is actually driven by public outcry or public support, right? So you either have, high ratings on a show or you have public outcry. And I think that that's so important. I think the public is so much more aware and educated, and we as consumers are more aware and educated when it comes to the content that we consume than we ever were before. And that's just showing a huge reaction from the industries that are producing that content. Networks and studios in Hollywood are creating internal task force to look at content and address any sort of, cultural competency, lack in cultural competencies within that content, and potential stereotypes or problematic things that are happening. In the journalism space, I think the thing that's difficult about news media is that it's more siloed than ever. We all sort of live in an echo chamber of the news that we consume and that we want to consume, and rarely do we step out of that echo chamber. But we really try to look at a consumer and a media consumer, a person, a human, in a really holistic way, because we as humans are not just impacted only by Netflix or only by the New York Times or only by NPR or Fox News. We're consuming media all day, all the time. Right. So the narrative structure and the narrative that we're swimming in is all around us. We don't even recognize it. We don't even register that we saw a billboard on the way to work and it made an impression on us, or that this song was played on the radio and then they said this, or that, at work in the background, the news was on, CNN was on the TV. We don't actually go into work anymore. So I'm sorry, these actual examples are not really relevant for most of us working remotely, right? But I think that we have a responsibility and accountability as consumers of content to put, our money where our mouths are, and to be really attentive to what we're paying attention to and to what we're not paying attention to, and to rally around and support projects that are authentic and diverse and representative and groundbreaking, and maybe to occasionally protest projects that aren't, and let your voice be heard. I think what happened with the Emmys this year was absolutely atrocious. It was a completely white winner's circle, essentially. And that's never really happened before. It's really, really damaging and bad. So I think that there's a lot of ways to be involved and to be active at every level of the issue. And it's all needed and necessary, because unfortunately, change in the media is slow. It's a slow moving ship. It takes years for a film to actually hit the market. And so what can we do in the meantime to make sure that our voices are heard?
Let me ask you, when it comes to all of us being a part of social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever platform we use, how important is it for us to put out, that positive information or positive messaging? And how do we filter some of the things that we read? Because sometimes we don't even know what is true, what's not true, what we can believe, what we shouldn't believe. So how do we go about that as consumers of all this information that's coming at us on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question, right? I think that it can be so difficult, but I love, thinking about the AARP, and I'm sure that they have very strong social media presence as well, but it's essentially like discerning, like, who do you trust, and really trying not to get your news from your friends on Facebook, which apparently is changing its name, I heard today. But, that can't be your number one news source, right? So like trying to filter and trying to be attentive to who are the sources. One of the things that we work on really deeply in the immigrant rights movement is that so often the sources that are cited, and it's not just by a Fox News or by a conservative media, it's also by NPR, they're actually recognized hate groups from the Southern Poverty Law Center. But because they're doing research, they're being cited as credible. So really, really take a deeper dive into where the facts are coming from, because there is so much misinformation or disinformation that's actually masquerading as academic, which is so interesting. So it's getting to the level where that's pretty scary, because if I see an academic source, I generally trust it. But there are non-accredited academic sources that you also have to be careful of. So yeah, it's a lot, and the algorithm does not help us as consumers. It pushes increasingly more sensational content your way to keep you tuning in. So I think just educating yourself on that is the best that we can do, really.
No, that's good to know. That's good.
Dr. Doran, can I just add to that? Just additional practical tips. And so obviously we look for, sources that have the blue check, especially if you're on Twitter. That's a signal that's a reliable source. But, I've also found just, read before you post, read before you tweet, read before you retweet. You'd be amazed at how tempting it is to just retweet something based upon a headline or based upon the photo that's featured in the post. And so I think one of the lessons that this pandemic is offering us is, if we slow down a little bit, if we take a pause, take a breath, take inventory of things, before we act, that may help to bring down the temperature in terms of the hyper partisanship that we see. And some of the vitriol that we see around, issues in the media landscape. And then the last thing I'll add, and this is, this is the Pepperdine family, and so I'm sure many of us can relate to this. We probably want to act responsibly and post and share content that affirms the humanity of others as opposed to diminishing the humanity of others, right? I think that would go a long way towards creating the kind of change that we all want to see, and creating a stronger bond, a greater sense of community between folks that may have different opinion on things, but we're still neighbors.
That's right. We certainly are. We certainly are. I'm just going to ask you one last question before I move everything to our Q&A from our chat. What type of advice would you give to the students who are listening to this and watching this today about becoming a social entrepreneur in the venue or in the space that they're in? Because all three of you have very different backgrounds, and you are a part of very different social networks. And so if someone is working with the homeless, or if someone wants to start a business, what could they do in order to bring that social impact or that the social causes into that area in which they're in? What would you say? What kind of advice would you give them? So Casey, I'm gonna start with you.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. I'd say my first piece of advice is don't ever hesitate to find people who are already doing the work and reach out to them. Everyone in this space generally is so excited to talk about the work that they do, so excited to share knowledge and skills and connections. And obviously connections in today's society are huge. I'd say my second piece of advice going back to what I said earlier, identify the problems around you. And obviously some of them might be far beyond your reach, but there's something that's within your reach that you can make an impact in. And, even if your job currently doesn't feel very socially impactful, I guarantee you there's a way for you to pave the path, a problem for you to identify and bring up at your next meeting, whatever it may be. And I would say lastly, going back to a point Elizabeth made earlier about our power as consumers when it comes to creating change, is just remember that you do have that power within you. And I have to remind myself of that all the time as someone working in the climate change sector, because the reality is that about 90 companies are actually responsible for 2/3 of the greenhouse emissions globally. It's not necessarily an individualized problem, but that's sort of the message that is being pushed because companies want to put the responsibility on somebody else. And sometimes that makes it feel like, the work that I'm doing is futile, but the reality is it's not, because every time throughout our history that systemic change has happened, it's because ordinary everyday people decide, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start talking about this. And that's really the only way, or at least I think the most sustainable way that systemic change happens. We can't always just wait on, the government or some other power at be to fix our problems. Like we have the initiative to within ourselves and within our communities. And I hope that's a reminder, especially to anyone out there who has a job where maybe they feel like they're not making enough of a difference, because your work matters. You do have the capacity to make change. Whatever you can do, just find a means to make small waves where you can. So
thank you. Elizabeth, what advice would you give someone?
Yeah, I really echo everything that Casey said. It was so on point, but also I would add that depending on where you are currently, whether you're in school or you're working for a company, there are like-minded individuals there. You might just not know it. I would suggest either joining or starting an employee resource group. Those can be incredibly powerful to push for change internally. Talk to people and find out who else is really interested in seeing the same change that you are, and start to kind of revolutionize around that. I think that exactly what Casey says, it all starts with one person, is absolutely right. And there's so much small changes, incremental. We talk about in media moving the needle. Well, that needle, like I was saying earlier, it doesn't move very far, very fast, but even a tiny movement is something, and we will get there. It just takes time. So don't get discouraged if you're not seeing a ton of big changes, but know that the small changes add up.
Wonderful. Now, Dr. Corte, what advice would you give to students and anyone else listening about how to make that social impact where in the space that they're in?
Great question, and I'll be quick. There are a few things that come to mind, and the first thing is a pearl of wisdom that a dear mentor of mine that has since passed away. His name was Willis Edwards. He was on the national board of the NAACP. And when I was a student organizer, undergrad at USC, he was sort of an advisor to our NAACP student chapter. And the one organizing principle that he shared with me that I've never forgotten, and I've applied to my life and career: do what you can from where you are with what you have.
Yes.
Do what you can from where you are with what you have. You can always have more. You can always ask for a bigger budget. You can always have more resources, but start somewhere. Start somewhere. I would also, add to what Casey had shared earlier. Do your homework. Understand the stakeholders involved. Understand the landscape that you're working in. Don't assume that you're the first, but make sure you're not the last.
Yes.
I'd also add, bring a diversity, equity, and inclusion consciousness to your work, whether it's your job or not. And the last thing I'll say is know your audience.
Yes.
Know your audience, and then know your audience of one. Everybody has an audience, and everybody has that audience of one, that individual that is really looking to you for leadership,
Yes.
that is really rooting for you,
Mhm.
that is blocking for you, that is sponsoring you. And so understand who that audience of one is and who your larger audience is.
Wonderful. All of that is wonderful advice. I thank all three of you for all of your comments and the information that you presented to all of us. I'm going to pass the torch on to Kate so that she can go through the other questions that everyone in the audience had.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. This has been a wonderful question for students like myself and our audience, I'm sure. One question that I actually had was, are there any social media groups or organizations that any of you would recommend for connecting to expand our network in the social entrepreneurship space? I know networking is a huge thing that we preach to our students, so that may be really helpful to hear if any of you have something to say about that.
I mean, just, LinkedIn, keep your LinkedIn up to date. That's where a lot of people that I know and don't know seem to find me, and I extend the invitation to everybody here. Not everybody at once, and I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently. There are some listservs that I'm a part of with people, with other change makers that I know and interact with on a more regular basis. And so when RFPs come out, or when job opportunities come out, or when I need to get the word to folks that also have robust networks, it's very helpful to be able to just sort of pop it in that listserv. And so I would encourage you all, as you develop your relationships as classmates and colleagues, to start building those listservs and cross-share information with one another, promote one another, celebrate one another, coach one another. I think that's a part of the magic of the SEC program's cohort model, and also the organizational leadership and now global leadership program. That model, the cohort model, there's a lot of value in that. Don't take it for granted. And at bare minimum, you all should be connected by way of a listserv to share opportunities.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the cohort. That was going to be my answer as well, is that one of the biggest support structures that I have still from grad school is our cohort. And being in Los Angeles, I'm lucky enough that I get to see quite a few of them regularly, at least once a month. And so it's just really wonderful to have that support and resource sharing, and, oh my gosh, this happened, and what do I do about that, and career advice, and we're all forging new paths. So it's really helpful to have someone else walking alongside you during that process.
Wonderful. Casey, did you have anything to add on to that, or?
I don't. LinkedIn and the cohorts, I think it's especially challenging right now with the pandemic and how it's kept us from meeting people in physical spaces. But if anyone has any recommendations out there that they'd like to send through the chat, I'm sure we'd love to learn from you all as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for this amazing conversation. I think I'll go and recap our resources that we offer. That's a great lead into this. So I'd like to transition into talking about Handshake and LinkedIn Learning. Handshake is GSEP's career portal where you have access to job postings, resources, and event information related to career services. So you should be able to access your Handshake account through WaveNet or through a direct link that we will be dropping in the chat. With employment listings, there's thousands of them nationwide. You have the option to search for keywords and filter by a lot of different variables. So you can specify location, full-time, part-time, or on-campus work. I'm a graduate assistant, so if you're looking for those student employment positions, that is where they would be on Handshake. With events, they also have a lot of upcoming career-related events posted by Handshake and also by employers as well for their virtual events. So you can read more info and register. If you're registered for this event with Handshake, you may be aware of it, but there's some great things happening. So I encourage you to stay updated. We also have a tab for resources, and there you can see tons of different resources to help you along your career path. We have everything from cover letter tips and samples to resume tips and samples to informational interview guides and sample interview questions for both psychology and education. And under the Career Center tab, you can also schedule an appointment with one of our team members at Career Services. We're here to help you with all of your career-related needs, from clarifying your direction and goals to updating your resume to helping you prep for an interview. So if you have any difficulties making an appointment, please email us and I'll be happy to look into it. As a courtesy, our team also reviews and provides feedback for the first resume you upload to Handshake. So I recommend you definitely take advantage of that. And for the LinkedIn Learning online training library at Pepperdine, it's a professional development resource available to all current faculty, staff, and students for free. LinkedIn Learning offers access to an extensive collection of online courses taught by instructors with real-world experience. So you can watch courses on business, creative, technology skills, and experience learning tailored to you. It's a great time to start learning. So popular topics at Pepperdine that I know of are time management, data analytics, communication, web design, Microsoft Excel, diversity and inclusion, teamwork, or Google Essentials. So sign in and start learning something new today. I'll pass it on now to Sophia to review Pep Connect.
Yes, thank you, Kate. So Pep Connect is an online platform for all of Pepperdine. We have included all of the schools, so Seaver, GSEP, all of the graduate schools. And it's an online platform where you can go and connect with people. There's also a business directory. So if you have a small business like Casey does, she would be able to promote her business on there as well. There is a directory and a way for you to find also mentors. So just how our panelists were talking about finding people similar to what they're thinking, you could go on there and find people that are also striving for those same changes. So it's a really great platform. It's also free, and I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat so you can go ahead and check it out, because it's a really great platform and I really recommend all of you to use it. And now I'll hand it over to Yas.
Thank you, Sophia and Kate. And I'm just so inspired by our panelists. So Dr. Corte, Casey, and Elizabeth, just the fact that you are willing to come back and share your wisdom and experience with us, volunteering to do that just really speaks to who you are as people, and just was so helpful and then motivating to hear about the little and big ways that you are making social change. And so just want to thank you again for your time, and Dr. Dorn for always being such a great facilitator, and Sophia for helping connect our panelists and bring them on today. So just want to thank you all again.
And yes, yes, can we thank you? I know it's been some time, but I remember when you were in career services, when I was a graduate student and then a doctoral student, and a big part of my story wouldn't be possible, without the staff and faculty of Pepperdine, sort of being a guide and, exposing me to different ideas, different ways of thinking, helping me to understand who I was as a leader. And so a big thank you to you and to Dean Williams and, to everybody there at Pepperdine, my chair, Dr. Farzine. I have very fond memories. And so you all make it very easy to say yes when you extend invitations like this.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So that means you'll do it again, right?
Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. Well, if you would like to watch this recording again or any of our GME Career Program recordings, we do have our participant drive. And so you'll also see the list of speakers and a connection to their social media. And just be able to go back and look at these recordings again. So also Sophia takes notes on some of the main points that are shared, and so we'll include that in the drive as well. So just a great resource to be able to go back to in the future. And then, oops, We'd also love your feedback. So we do our GME career programs every term. And so your feedback actually helps inform the types of programs that we do. So I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. So for those of you who registered via Handshake, you would have access to our just very brief program evaluation, and just gives us feedback on how this program landed for you, as well as what ideas or suggestions you have for future programs. That's really where we get our ideas and inspirations to do this, the type of panels that we do. And then just to build off on today's session, next week, our Social Entrepreneurship and Change program is hosting a virtual summit advocating for social change. So I know that we loved what we heard today, and just an opportunity to build off of what you heard and expand your network further in the social impact space. This would be a great opportunity to be able to connect with others from the Social Entrepreneurship and Change program, as well as friends and supporters of the program as well. So I'll go ahead and put that in the chat too. So what's next? Our final fall 2021 GME Career Webinar will be November 8th. That's a Monday. And the topic is From Classrooms to Careers. So career transitions for Pepperdine's military connected community. And I'll go ahead and put those registrations in the chat. Whether you are a student or whether you are an alumni or guest, all are welcome to attend. And that'll be our final one for the fall series. We invite you to follow us on social media. It's a great way to stay connected, and also to, as Dr. Corte said, support and promote one another. So GSEP has 4 different social media channels that are very active. So we encourage you to be a part of the conversation as well. So thank you all again for taking the time to attend today. If you have any questions, you're welcome to follow up with us at Career Services or through Alumni Relations, and we look forward to seeing you in November. So thank you again, and a very special thanks again to our guests today. We just are so inspired by the work that you're doing. Thank you.